Look out your kitchen window right now. The lawn is bustling. Sparrows skirmish over seeds, a thrush probes the damp earth beneath the hydrangeas, and a pair of doves share a quiet moment on the fence line. It feels entirely random, a casual, organic slice of suburban wildlife. But if you were to watch closely day after day, you would notice something deeply unsettling. Without a warning alarm, without a single sound of panic, every single feather on your property lifts off simultaneously. Not a minute early, not a minute late. 1 second, the garden is loud with life, and the next, it is a ghost town. You brush it off as coincidence. Yet beneath the calm surface of your backyard, an invisible clock is ticking down to a synchronized exodus that happens right under your nose. Most people assume animals operate on loose, instinctual whims, eating when hungry, resting when tired, fleeing only when a shadow suddenly passes overhead. But the clockwork disappearance of garden birds defies simple coincidence. It happens with such military precision that you could set your watch by it. Consider what is actually happening in your patch of green. To the naked human eye, a garden is a static decoration, a collection of plants and lawn furniture. To an avian mind, however, it is a high-stakes calculation grid. Every leaf, every shadow angle, and every passing minute represents a shifting equation of risk and reward. When a flock of mixed species clears out of a yard at 9:14 a.m. every single morning, they are not guessing. They are responding to a hidden network of pressures so fine-tuned that our clumsy human senses cannot even register them. Think about your own yard. You walk out to grab the mail, and nothing changes. The sparrows stay put. Yet, at a specific minute, when no humans are moving, no cars are passing, and the wind is entirely dead, a collective decision rips through the canopy. Why? What invisible hand sweeps the branches clean of life like clockwork? The answer does not lie in random chance. It is governed by a hidden machinery of fear, physics, and biological engineering operating just beyond our perception. And once you understand how the machinery works, you will never look at an empty garden the same way again. We like to think of our yards as safe harbors, little sanctuaries of nature that we curate for the benefit of local wildlife. We put out seed bells, maintain bird baths, and plant nectar-rich shrubs, imagining ourselves as benevolent hosts to the local ecosystem. The reality is far more sobering. Your garden is not a sanctuary. It is a staging ground. It is a temporary feeding station embedded within a vast hostile matrix of invisible predators, shifting thermal barriers, and ancient survival math. When the birds vanish from your yard in that sudden, coordinated pulse, they are fleeing a danger that you cannot see, cannot hear, and cannot protect them from. Understanding this daily evacuation changes your relationship with the natural world right outside your window. It strips away the comforting illusion of suburban harmony and replaces it with a profound appreciation for the hyper-vigilant, silent theater of survival playing out every single day. If you want to understand the true rhythm of the wild, you have to stop looking at the birds when they are eating and start paying attention to the exact second they decide they are no longer safe. Before we pull back the curtain on this daily mass exodus, if you find yourself fascinated by the hidden mechanics of the natural world that happen right in our own backyards, take a quick second to hit subscribe. We dive deep into the untold stories of everyday wildlife. Now, let's look at the first hidden gear driving this phenomenon, starting with the invisible geometry of the garden itself. To understand why life drains from your garden on a strict schedule, we must first look at how birds experience temperature not as a feeling, but as a physical barrier. Imagine a suburban backyard at dawn. The air is crisp, moisture clings to the blades of grass, and the long shadows of fences stretch across the lawn. To a small sparrow or finch, these shadow lines are not just aesthetic. They are thermal battlegrounds. As the sun rises, it does not warm a garden evenly. Concrete patios bake rapidly, open lawns heat at a moderate rate, and dense shrubbery stays trapped in a pocket of cool, humid air. At a specific moment each morning, often within a 3-minute window, the ambient temperature at ground level crosses a microscopic threshold. The dew begins to evaporate in a microscale wave, shifting the relative humidity of the lower vegetation layers. To us, the air feels identical. To an avian respiratory system, the air suddenly loses its protective moisture density and thermoregulatory stress spikes. This thermal shift triggers the first layer of the exodus. Insects, which form the vital high-protein diet of many garden visitors, react instantly to this microclimate change by dropping lower into the soil or retreating beneath bark. The birds, reading this subtle ecological cue before it even registers to our eyes, realize the foraging window in the open grass has closed. But temperature is only the baseline. As the thermal landscape shifts, it awakens something far more dangerous in the surrounding airspace. While you are sipping your morning coffee, a silent predator is consulting a different kind of clock, one built entirely on light angles and ambush efficiency. Consider the sharp-shinned hawk or the Eurasian sparrowhawk. These avian hunters do not hunt by random patrol. They hunt by calculus. Their success rate relies entirely on the geometry of light and shadow during specific windows of the morning. When the sun hits a certain angle over your roofline, it creates a temporary blinding glare or a long dark corridor of cover across your lawn. To a hawk, this lighting condition is a tactical green light. For roughly 20 minutes every day, the alignment of the sun and the shadows cast by your fence, your garage, and your oak tree creates a high-contrast hunting tunnel. The hawk can approach slow, moving through the blind spot of the human eye and the peripheral vision of ground-feeding flocks. Here is where the collective brilliance of the garden birds comes into play. They do not wait to see the hawk. They have memorized the chronometer of risk. They know that at 9:14 a.m. or whatever exact minute corresponds to that seasonal sun angle, the tactical window for aerial ambush opens wide. The sudden departure of every bird from your yard is not a reaction to a spotted predator. It is a preemptive strike against probability. They clear the board because the math dictates that staying is a fatal gamble. The hawk arrives a minute later to find an empty stage, its ambush thwarted not by vigilance but by the prey's mastery of time. Beyond light and heat, there is an entire world of sound operating just beneath the threshold of human hearing that dictates when a garden becomes uninhabitable. We think of our neighborhoods as quiet when the traffic dies down, but the earth itself is constantly humming. Low-frequency vibrations known as infrasound travel through the ground and the lower atmosphere generated by distant highway rumble, industrial HVAC systems, heavy freight trains miles away, and even the rhythmic groan of tectonic plates settling. In a suburban garden, these infrasonic waves bounce off houses, fences, and paved driveways, creating standing acoustic waves. At certain times of day, as atmospheric pressure shifts with the morning warming cycle, these invisible sound waves align and amplify in specific backyard corners. To a human ear, it is absolute silence. But to a bird whose inner ear and skeletal structure are remarkably sensitive to vibrational resonance, certain frequencies act like a physical pressure pressing against their bodies. As the morning progresses, municipal routines, garbage trucks miles off, automated lawn care schedules kicking in across adjacent suburbs, or the spooling up of distant commercial operations send out waves that eventually sweep across your property. When the ambient infrasonic pressure hits a specific critical frequency, it mimics the acoustic signature of a massive approaching disturbance, such as a severe weather front or a large stampeding herd in wilder landscapes. The birds do not wait to see the storm or the threat. Their evolutionary wiring interprets the acoustic shift as an immediate evacuation order. They lift off in unison, leaving behind a garden that feels quiet to us precisely because the birds have fled the invisible noise we cannot hear. The synchronized clearance of a garden relies on an internal social technology so sophisticated it rivals human communication networks, the sentinel tier. If you watch a mixed-species flock feeding on your lawn, goldfinches, juncos, and robins, it looks like a chaotic free-for-all. In reality, it is a hierarchical surveillance state. Certain birds, often larger or more experienced species like scrub jays, magpies, or dominant starlings, assume watchtower positions on high branches, power lines, or roof ridges. These sentinels are not foraging. Their entire metabolic focus is dedicated to scanning the horizon for anomalies in motion, light, and sound. But their most remarkable feature is the encoding of their alarm system. When a sentinel detects a subtle Raptor feather catching the light 2 blocks away, or a sudden change in the flight path of distant pigeons, it does not issue a simple, generic scream. Instead, it transmits a high-frequency, broadband acoustic click or a modulated whistle that carries precise directional and urgency data. In milliseconds, this signal propagates through the multi-species flock. A goldfinch hears it, interprets the exact vector of risk, and relays it to adjacent juncos before its own brain has even consciously processed the threat. This is why the entire garden seems to empty in a single frame. It is not individual decision-making. It is a cascading biological algorithm. One bird sees or hears the trigger, and the entire flock executes a pre-programmed evacuation script. By the time you look up from your book to see why the yard is empty, the communication network has already completed its cycle, moving the entire population into dense, secure cover blocks away. Underpinning all of this is a relentless, microscopic engine, the internal metabolic clock that dictates every second of a bird's waking life. A small garden bird lives on the absolute edge of biological insolvency. With a high metabolic rate, a tiny body loses heat rapidly and burns calories at a ferocious pace. Every minute spent foraging must yield a precise caloric return, or the bird faces starvation by nightfall. This creates a strict daily foraging schedule governed by the availability of high-energy food sources. Insects are most active and accessible when the morning sun hits a specific temperature, usually peaking in a tight window before the heat drives them deep underground or into dense foliage. The birds know this window down to the minute. They arrive in your garden in a massive surge at first light because their internal energy reserves are dangerously low after a freezing night. They gorge systematically, stripping the most productive seed heads and insect-rich foliage first. But by mid-morning, that primary caloric bonanza is exhausted. The easy pickings are gone, leaving only high-risk, low-reward foraging that exposes them to predators for too little energetic return. At this exact mathematical tipping point, when the energy cost of staying exceeds the caloric intake, the flock triggers a mass departure. They do not leave because they are scared. They leave because their internal ledger tells them it is time to move to secondary, deeper woodland feeding grounds where shelter to food ratios are more favorable. Your garden is simply the breakfast buffet that closes its doors right on schedule. We have traced the threads, the subtle thermal shifts waking the microclimate, the precise tactical angles of the hidden raptors, the infrasonic waves vibrating through the soil, the lightning-fast cascade of the sentinel network, and the unforgiving math of avian metabolism. Endingly, none of these forces work in isolation. They are part of an interlocking, synchronized orchestra. Nature does not operate in random bursts. It operates in relentless, interlocking cycles. As the morning wears on, these 5 pressures converge. The temperature hits its threshold. The shadow lines align for the hunting hawk. The acoustic pressure wave rolls through the dirt. The sentinel detects the baseline anomaly, and the metabolic clock clicks over to its next mandatory phase. When you look at an empty garden at 9:15 a.m., you are looking at the exact point where 5 separate invisible vectors intersect. And yet, there is something even deeper happening here. Something that connects the sudden silence of your backyard to the ancient wild rhythms of the planet. We think of our suburban landscapes as separate from nature, tamed and managed by human hands. But the birds remind us, with clockwork precision every single day, that they are plugged into a much older, much larger matrix, a matrix that we ignore at our own peril. The ultimate realization is this: the birds are not leaving your garden. You are merely renting a small waypoint in a vast, invisible migratory highway that operates completely independently of human existence. When that mass exodus happens in total silence, you are witnessing the absolute triumph of evolutionary synchronization over human domesticity. Your manicured lawn, your expensive bird feeder, and your carefully pruned hedges are nothing more than a momentary convenience on a map written thousands of years before your house was built. The birds do not care about your schedule. They do not care about your landscaping efforts. They answer to a planetary chronometer governed by the rotation of the Earth, the angle of the sun, and the eternal brutal war between predator and prey. When they vanish at that exact second every day, they are stepping out of our world and into theirs, a world operating on frequencies, timings, and rules that we can barely begin to fathom. So tomorrow morning, look out your window again. Watch the sparrows, the thrushes, and the doves bustling across the grass. Enjoy the noise, the color, and the life while it lasts. But remember, as the minutes tick away toward that familiar hour, keep your eyes on the trees. Because when the silence finally falls and the lawn empties in a single breathless second, you will know the secret. The invisible clock has struck, and the wild has reclaimed its territory once more. At what exact time of day do all the birds completely vanish from your garden? Drop your local time in the comments below, and let's see if this invisible clock is ticking at the exact same minute in your part of the world.